The much-loved comedian Victoria Wood has died. She died at home in London, surrounded by her family after a short illness. She was just 62.
Let's do it tonight. But he said, I can't do it, I'm not exactly right.
Tonight, tributes to the brilliant writer and entertainer who blazed a trail for women in comedy.
Also tonight, a jump in unemployment. Some blame uncertainty over the EU.
The Queen's birthday celebrations begin and George gets a royal box all of his own for the official photo.
And peak of fitness, astronaut Tim prepares for his marathon in space.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Charlene White.
Good evening. She wasn't just one of Britain's best-loved comics. She was a brilliant writer, director and award-winning actor too. Victoria Wood's death at the age of 62, shortly after being diagnosed with cancer, has come as a shock to her friends and millions of fans. Her longtime comedy partner, Julie Walters, said tonight the loss of her is incalculable.
Victoria Wood has been a fixture on our TV screen since the early 1980s. Her everyday humour helping her to rise to prominence in what was then a male-dominated world of comedy. Duncan Golestani reports the death of a rare talent.
Well, this time it was a magazine phoning. I said, oh, do you know what I look like? Have you ever seen me on the television? And she said, no, I only watched the show Jumping. I said, well, imagine a bale of hay with bosom.
Victoria Wood's stand-up and sketches dominated 1980s comedy. She found her humour in the small, everyday things.
What about those Dublin prawns?
Never touch prawns. Do you know they hang around sewage outlet pipes, treading water with their mouths open?
Suburban living, love and class were all there to be skewered, but her humour was always affectionate rather than mocking.
Aren't prawns an aphrodisiac?
I wouldn't put it past them.
Victoria Wood found fame after winning New Faces in 1974.
Probably be something practical in stainless steel.
But it was her own show, Victoria Wood as seen on TV, which made her a star.
Feel better for your run?
I certainly do.
As a writer and producer, she often gave the best lines to her friends and colleagues. Some of the show's sketches became comedy classics.
2 soups.
Among the many tributes to Victoria Wood, longtime collaborator Duncan Preston, who said, "Today the world has lost one of the best comedy writers to have ever lived. I feel honoured to have known and worked with her." On Twitter, Jennifer Saunders added, "Vic was simply one of the funniest writers and performers this country has ever produced. She was an inspiration and will be terribly missed."
She's nothing to do with me. Nobody's ordered an old lady, have they?
Let's do it while the mood
Victoria Wood's brother has said his sister's death has come as a great shock and robbed us of one of the brightest talents of our generation.
I can handle half the tenors in a male voice choir. Let's do it tonight.
The comedian Victoria Wood, who's died at the age of 62.
The uncertainty created by the EU referendum was blamed by Remain campaigners today for the rise in unemployment. For the first time since last summer, the number of people out of work is going up.
1.7 million are now jobless, but those campaigning to leave the EU said linking that to the referendum was cynical. Our political correspondent Romilly Weeks reports.
At this Oxford company that makes gazebos, they're in the business of protecting people against a rainy day. But they're also protecting themselves against future uncertainty and not expanding whilst a question mark hangs over Britain's place in Europe.
We're just holding off making any big decisions. If we decide to move into Germany and we experience further growth, it means we will need to employ more people, more joiners, more carpenters, more people in marketing and PR, customer services possibly. So these decisions, we cannot make those decisions without, first of all, establishing the demand.
With today's figures showing the first increase in unemployment for 8 months, the government says it could be a warning of what leaving the EU might mean.
It's becoming increasingly clear, and every piece of independent economic analysis demonstrates this, that leaving the single market would have a knock-on impact in terms of the economy. This is just not just a theoretical debate. This will mean jobs being lost and families being hit hard.
The number of unemployed people in the UK rose to 1.7 million between December and February. That's a rise of more than 21,000 on the previous 3 months, and the first increase in unemployment since the middle of 2015. But the number of people in work in the UK stands at 31.4 million, which is still a record high. Some economists believe the possibility of Britain leaving is playing its part.
I think it's really hard to pinpoint exactly how big a factor Brexit concerns have been in this rise in unemployment, because there are other factors that could be pushing unemployment up too. That said, there have been some tentative signs of Brexit effects on other things such as investment intentions, and it would perhaps make sense, with the referendum only a couple of months away, for firms to just be a bit more cautious for the next month or two.
Yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of England suggested uncertainty over Europe was already having an impact on our economy. Leave campaigners see this as just another cynical attempt to ramp up the fear factor. What it certainly is another example of how everything in politics is being coloured by should we stay or should we go. The likelihood is that a number of factors, including the wider global economic slowdown and the introduction of the national living wage here, have played their part in this increase. But while Leave and Remain argue over the cause, what these figures do indicate, combined with the slowdown in wage growth too, is that there's a bit more of a warning light flashing now over the state of the UK economy.
All right, Romilly, thank you.
Mitsubishi has admitted falsifying fuel economy data for more than 600,000 vehicles sold in Japan. The company says staff deliberately recorded inaccurate tests to make emissions levels look better. Its share price fell 15% today.
And 2 former soldiers have been cleared of raping Corporal Anne-Marie Element at her army barracks in Germany in November 2009. Thomas Fulton and Jeremy Jones admitted having sex with Miss Element, who died in 2011, but claimed it was consensual.
In the middle of Prime Minister's questions today, David Cameron was briefly silenced by shouts of racist from the benches of the opposition. He'd been accusing Sadiq Khan, Labour's London mayoral candidate, of sharing platforms with a known extremist. Our political correspondent Libby Vina reports on the day the campaign turned nasty.
He's looking increasingly like the man to beat in the battle to be London's next mayor. His main rival, the Tory Zac Goldsmith, trailing in the polls. Which perhaps explains why David Cameron today, using the platform of Prime Minister's questions, chose to launch a highly personal attack on Sadiq Khan, suggesting he was happy to share platforms with extremists.
It is very important that we do not back these people and we do not appear on platforms with them. And I have to say, I am concerned about Labour's candidate as Mayor of London, who has appeared again and again and again. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think they are shouting down this point because they don't want to hear the truth.
Not just shouting, but shouting racist. Many Labour MPs outraged at what they saw as a smear. What did the mayoral candidate himself think?
I'm really disappointed that the Prime Minister has joined Zac Goldsmith's desperate and negative campaign. At a time we should be uniting communities, they appear to be dividing communities.
His rival was keeping a diplomatic silence today, but other candidates felt the Prime Minister had gone too far.
I think these attacks from the Conservatives have got to stop. I don't think they'd be doing it for a non-Muslim candidate, and I think it's insulting to Londoners.
I think this is what gives politics a bad name. People want to know what you're going to do to tackle the key issues facing London, the housing crisis. How can we make transport more affordable? How can we make our streets safer? We don't need all this squabbling and mudslinging.
But far from apologising, a Number 10 source later suggested the Labour Party was doing itself a disservice, branding the Prime Minister's comments racist. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
And you can see the full list of candidates in the London mayoral election on screen now. The vote takes place on the 5th of May.
The Queen began celebrations for her 90th birthday today with a party thrown by the Royal Mail itself, marking its 500th anniversary. She was shown the commemorative stamps being released to celebrate her milestone, and they include, for the first time, Prince George. Our royal editor Tim Peake is at Windsor Castle tonight. Tim.
Yes, Mark, the Queen is spending a quiet night here at Windsor Castle tonight ahead of what's going to be very considerable excitement tomorrow. Today, she ventured out and she had a taste of what lies ahead.
Happy birthday to you.
It fell to the Royal Mail, celebrating its 500th birthday, to serenade the Queen today. A day early, of course, but nevertheless appropriate, as the monarch's 90th is being marked with a new set of stamps, one featuring Prince George, third in line to the throne. His image will be taken from this portrait of the Queen and her heirs, George standing on blocks to give him a little extra height.
Very kind, thank you.
The Queen might have been reflecting on her own early years. She was a 25-year-old princess when her father, King George VI, waved her off on an overseas tour. She returned as Queen after his premature death, remembering much later the challenges she faced.
In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and so it was all a very sudden kind of taking on and making the best job you can. It's a question of maturing into something that one's got used to doing and accepting the fact that here you are and it's your fate, because I think continuity is very important. It is a job for life.
A job for life and an inspiration for the generations that followed.
Because of my time in the service, the utmost of respect that I have, not just as a grandmother, but as my boss. You know, she was my boss for 10 years, and I viewed her very much like that. And now it's really nice because I can go to her for advice and bend her ear over all the experience that she's had over the years.
In Windsor's Alexandra Gardens, children sang for the Queen and marvelled at her stamina.
I didn't know that people could live up to that age and still be doing all the things that she's doing. If I was 90 and the Queen, I wouldn't be working. I just think I'd be sat down.
Tomorrow, the party for the 90-year-old Queen will begin in earnest. It certainly will be in earnest. Thousands of people are expected to line the streets of Windsor when the Queen goes on a walkabout tomorrow. She'll be presented with a birthday cake. In the evening, she will light the first of a chain of beacons that will be lit across the country to wish her happy birthday.
All right, Tim, big day ahead. Thanks very much.
Still to come on the evening news. Big wins for Trump and Clinton as they move closer to a head-to-head contest.
And from space walk to space run, Tim Peake limbers up for the London Marathon. Is there anything he can't do? Those stories and more right after the break.
Welcome back. Donald Trump has regained the momentum in the race to become the Republicans' presidential nominee by securing a decisive victory in New York overnight. It now looks increasingly likely he will be the one contesting November's election, while his Democratic opponent is now almost certain to be Hillary Clinton. From New York, Robert Moore reports.
The music and the mood told the story of the night.
New York, New York.
This was Donald Trump's greatest victory yet in the unorthodox campaign that has already shaken American politics to its core. New Yorkers woke up to see and to read that Trump had seized almost the entire hall of delegates on offer, leaving his main rival on the ropes.
We don't have much of a race anymore, based on what I'm seeing on television. Senator Cruz is just about mathematically eliminated.
And he was contemptuous of the party bosses who are still furiously plotting against him.
Because the people aren't going to stand for it. It's a crooked system, it's a system that's rigged, and we're going to go back to the old way. It's called you vote and you win.
Some of Trump's supporters in the room saw the victory in biblical terms.
I mean, he's not a messiah or nothing, but I think he's from God. I think God sent Donald Trump to this country to make this country grow again and become whole again, bring back the morals to this country.
There is palpable excitement here that the goal of reaching 1,237 delegates is still just within reach, and that would avoid a brutal fight on the floor of the Republican convention. And it would pitch Trump almost certainly into a final showdown with Hillary Clinton, for she won a big victory over her rival Bernie Sanders.
The race for the Democratic nomination is in the home stretch and victory is in sight.
Overnight, the New York contest has strengthened the front runners and hinted at a fierce battle between the consummate insider
There's no place like home.
and the ultimate outsider.
We love New York. We love New York.
Robert Moore, ITV News, New York.
The number of migrants believed to have drowned crossing the Mediterranean appears to have risen for the first time in months. It's feared that last week up to 500 people lost their lives in a single incident as an overloaded fishing boat sank off the coast of Libya.
Mass murderer Anders Breivik has won part of his human rights case against the Norwegian state. The court upheld his claim that being held in isolation amounted to inhuman or degrading treatment.
Major Tim Peake has already taken on some pretty tough challenges during his stint on the International Space Station, and this weekend he'll embark on another. On Sunday morning, along with 38,000 athletes back here on Earth, he will be running a marathon. What makes it slightly more troublesome for him, of course, is there is no gravity to keep his feet on the ground. Paul Davis reports.
The straps are essential when you're running in zero gravity. They stop you floating away. Tim Peake will run his marathon on a treadmill 260 miles above the Earth, though the view is disappointing.
Unfortunately, the treadmill isn't located by the window, so the one thing I won't be able to do is actually look out the window and look at planet Earth as I run the race.
Tim, I'm coming out.
Like thousands of runners preparing for Sunday's race, Major Tim has had to fit training into his day job. Only his job involves spacewalks and experiments on board the International Space Station. Today, he took time out to join us via satellite link-up to look ahead to his own space race.
While all the runners down here will be
buoyed by the crowds and their fellow runners,
isn't it going to be a very lonely experience for you up there on your treadmill?
I guess you could say that, but I'm pretty used to life on board the space station now. I've been over 4 months up here, and of course I have got my other crewmates who will be popping into Node 3 where I'll be running the race, and they'll be cheering me on at times.
Major Tim is hoping to complete his own unique zero-gravity marathon within 4 hours. He will actually be travelling at almost 18,000 miles an hour on board the International Space Station and is expected to circle the whole planet 2.5 times before finishing his race. His top tip, no snacking before the start.
Of course, food in microgravity, it doesn't settle very well. It just stays floating around in your stomach. So I'll have an early breakfast so I'm ready to run later in the day.
The astronaut who'll be representing the Prince's Trust on Sunday returns to Earth in June. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Good luck, Major Tim. Right, finally, back to the Queen's birthday. As you saw earlier, she was full of energy today as she kicked off her celebrations the day before she reaches 90. And despite her workload, there's no hint of retirement.
All this week, we've been speaking to other women who, like Her Majesty, are refusing to down tools just because of their age. As part of our coverage of the Queen's 90th birthday, Nina Nana hears from the celebrated children's author Judith Kerr, who at 92 is still bursting with ideas.
It is in this room, at this desk, where for decades Judith Kerr has created precious memories for millions of children. The illustrator and writer of the Mog series and The Tiger Who Came to Tea has never been busier. She released 2 more books last year. Don't judge us 90-year-olds by our age, she says.
Well, first of all, that being 90 is not as old as it used to be, but probably, well, I don't know about the Queen. I love my work. I think she probably does.
Judith was just 9 when she and her family fled Germany on the eve of Hitler coming to power. Her father, a Jewish intellectual and theatre critic, was on a Nazi death list for criticising the regime. After crossing Europe, England became their home as the Second World War began.
So do you remember when you first became aware of the royal family and the princesses, the future Queen?
I remember seeing a bit of film of her learning to strip a car in the war, which is something she did. And I thought, well, that looks very good. And she looked as though she was enjoying it. I thought it must be fun for her. We both lived through the Blitz. We both must have thought that it was all going to end badly, or that it very likely might, and it didn't. And I think that gives one quite a boost.
As for retirement, like the Queen, there's no sign of that.
One reason I'm still at it is because I started rather late. I published my first book at the age of 45.
But I suppose when you look at the Queen, she's been doing what she's been doing then longer than you.
Much longer, and she started very young. It was hard on her, but she did a good job, didn't she?
Nina Nanar, ITV News.
Very nice. So quite a day tomorrow. Mary will be at Windsor for all the celebrations on tomorrow night's programme. That's it for now. Julie Etchingham is here at 10.
That's true, but from all of the team here, enjoy your evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.